Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where entrepreneurs, founders, and ambitious professionals come to learn from those who have walked the path, navigating challenges and achieving success. Whether it's thriving in business, pivoting, scaling for growth, fundraising, or finding work-life balance, dealing with loneliness, adversity, or overcoming personal struggles. Our guests share the insights and strategies that have empowered them to level up. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Steven Webster. Steven is not only a lifelong entrepreneur and technologist, but also a martial arts and coach with multiple black belts under his belt. As a CEO and founder of ASENSEI, Steven is at the forefront of revolutionizing connected health and fitness through cutting-edge motion capture technology. But his journey didn't start here. From selling his first company to Adobe and leading innovative projects for global giants like Adobe and Microsoft, to coaching national championship teams in martial arts, Steven's career is a masterclass in building, pivoting, and succeeding against the odds. In this episode, we'll explore the incredible story behind ASENSEI, the lessons Steven has learned from both corporate and entrepreneurial ventures, and the innovatable failures that have shaped his success. Hi, Steven. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into this conversation with you. So you've had a fascinating journey from martial artist to coach to technologist and entrepreneurship. What inspired you to transition from coaching to building businesses like ASENSEI?
Great question. It wasn't so much a transition as it's these two parallel paths I've kind of had going on in my life. I've always played sport. I coached from an early age, like martial arts was my background, as you mentioned. And, I was assisting as a coach when I was like 13. And, through university, I competed, I captained, I coached. I ended up coaching my university's karate club post-graduation for 10 years. So that's always been one thread through my life is, playing and competing and coaching sport. And then at the same time, it was academics. And, I was at university to get a degree in science and electronics. Graduated, became a hardware engineer, a chip designer, and then a software engineer when the internet happened because that seemed way more fun. Um, and and I guess in the so those kind of two parallel paths, if you like, they've always intertwined as well. Like my dad was an electrical engineer, so even growing up, I was the kid with a soldering iron, and I was always like, how can I put like a red light on my hockey goals? I love that you're from Toronto. One of my family's dear friends, his jersey is in the NHL museum in the Toronto
Oh,
in Toronto. So, and I've seen it there.
nice.
So yeah. So I wanted to have like, how can I wire up a hockey light on my goals? How can I wire up lights on my punch bag so I can time my reactions? And I just always loved kind of bringing these two worlds together. And fast forward, through building a company and selling it and working for big companies. I was at Microsoft and I was just in this world of, I was seeing what was happening. I was seeing what was coming with wearable technology, with AI, with computer vision, we're all talking about intelligent agents in 2025, but I was
Mm,
there in 2012 and we were talking about intelligent agents. And I just realized that this problem that I've always wanted to solve, both as an athlete and as a coach, the technologies were kind of coalescing to solve it. And that problem was any of us that have ever tried to learn anything physical, whether it's like learning a dance for your wedding, doing your physical therapy, learning a sport, learning it from a book or a video is really hard, and learning it from an
mm.
expert in the room is a lot easier. And how do you do that digitally? So that's the problem I left Microsoft to solve. It was this kind of really compelling pull to like, I think we can make fitness and sport and physical therapy and healthcare something that can be done at digital scale if we can teach machines to understand movement. So that was the journey.
Okay, so can you share the origin story of a sensei? What gap in the market were you aiming to fill? And how did your background in martial arts influence its creation?
The origin story. So I was really interested in what was happening in wearable technology. Like if you remember when we were plugging things in the bottom of our iPod and sticking a sensor in our Nike shoes
Hmm.
and challenging our friend. Like I loved that. That satisfied that that nerd out, like how can tech and sport come together? Fitbit was happening. And I just started to have this notion of like I tend to kind of see where things are going to go from where they are
Hmm.
today, and so I'm looking at the Fitbit on the belt and thinking soon that's not going to be in the belt. It's going to be embedded in the shirt. It's going to be, and then there won't be one of them. There'll be many of them, and I think you could track the whole body and the skeleton. And so I kind of got into this idea of actually smart clothing, and that's how we started the company was around the idea of smart clothing. Um, I think another part of the origin story is I think it's really important for entrepreneurs that there's a deep intrinsic motivation to start this company. It's not going to pay you well and it's going to be hard and it's going to take a long time. Um, and the intrinsic motivation for me was I had that kind of sugared water moment. Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? I had that moment of, what am I going to do with all this knowledge I've acquired in my
Mm.
career? And I really wanted to be in kind of health and wellness and healthcare and like making people healthier, but I wasn't a doctor. I didn't come from a medical background, but I had coached a lot of people's sport. So that was the two things that were kind of combining. And then finally, it was at the top of Snowmass Mountain in Colorado, where my wife is a beautiful skier and I suck. That I was like, could really use this idea I have to teach me how to ski. And so yeah, I just had this itch to scratch. I was at Microsoft, and if I'm honest, like an entrepreneur inside of Microsoft was a little frustrating. Like the pace of
Mm.
progress, despite the talent, was really frustrating. And so I was looking to start another company, and yeah, that's where Essentially came from.
So tell us a little bit about what a sensei does and how it works.
We've made human movement something a machine can understand. So we're kind of like speech recognition, but for movement. So in the same way that a microphone can now pick up what we're saying, and a machine
Hmm.
can understand it and interpret it and make sense of it, and now even respond and interact because of what it heard. We've done the same for movement by replacing the microphone with a camera. So camera on a smartphone, on a laptop, on your connected fitness hardware, your TV. We've trained that camera to see you, to extract your skeleton from the video image, from that skeleton to understand what are you doing? Are you doing yoga? Or are you weightlifting? And then if you're doing yoga, what pose are you doing? Oh, it's a warrior two. And now we know you're doing a warrior two. Your
Mm.
back leg should be straight and your arm should be parallel to the floor. And so we've got this deep understanding of movement. And then that allows us to bring on a layer of coaching and what we call coaching intelligence. So it's as simple as we've developed all of the AI technology that allows you to have the voice of your favorite coach in your ear, but you're not listening to a recording. They are reacting to your actual movement. They're maybe talking you through a yoga flow or guiding you through a strength workout or taking you through your physical therapy. And depending how well you're doing it and what coaching they would give you if they were actually there, we're able to synthesize that clone voice in your ear and deliver you that coaching. So it's the vision for the company 10 years ago was you'd put in an earpiece and you would just hear this coach that magically knew what you were doing and was able to teach you sport or teach you fitness. And that's what we've developed. We have over 20 customers now who are using our technology inside their products to bring these kind of AI powered coaching products to market.
I love it. That sounds fascinating to me. So, like, I'm one of those people that have like signed up for apps in the past that you have like a person sort of telling you what to do. But I will admit, I never know if I'm doing it quite right. I always
There you
feel
go.
like I'm trying to follow what they say, but half the time I'm lost and I'm like, am I even doing this right? And then of course, like I I no longer sign up for the app and then I don't remember how to do it anymore. So
Right.
I think that's fascinating that you were able to like train a camera to read language and then help you improve. And I also find fascinating and I think it's actually really smart that you've taken it to physical therapy as well.
Right. And it's funny,
right?
that was always I won't name drop, but there was a very famous, former football player who was asked to do due diligence on our company, was not,
Oh.
even though I won't say who it was, they had no intention of investing in our company, but they were brought in as an expert in sport to do due diligence on us. It's like 10 years ago. And their feedback was, this is great, but you should really think about physical therapy. They were like, this is great for
Yeah.
sport, but you should think about physical therapy. And the challenge with physical therapy, and this is something you have to think about as a founder, is like, you're betting on your first market. And so you have to think about the complexity of that first market. And we had this two
Mm.
by two matrix, the classic Boston matrix of all the fitness or movement modalities that I'm trying to remember. I think I've got this on my LinkedIn somewhere. I found it recently, but I think the x-axis was um, how much value would having a sensei add to the experience of that sport? And the y-axis is how complex would it be to bring that solution to market? And we were looking for something that was like high value but low complexity. Physical therapy was massive value but really high complexity. And it wasn't just like technical complexity, it was regulatory complexity. It was like the
Mhm.
payer model in the US is complicated. So we decided that connected fitness would be our beachhead market. We would really focus on that explosion of at-home workouts, and everybody was thinking, should I get a Peloton or a Tonal or a Hydro? So we really leaned into that customer base, knowing that if we were successful, we would be pulled into physical therapy, and that's what's happened. We haven't announced all of our customers in physical therapy yet, but we have customers doing movement screening and assessments. We have customers doing virtual PT. We have customers doing virtual PT where we want to drive adherence. Exactly, your problem of fitness apps is just as big a
Mhm.
problem in physical therapy, but oftentimes with a population who aren't even fitness savvy. They've not necessarily done a cat cow before or a downward dog before, so they definitely don't want to get hurt. And I'm really proud of one of our customers called Neurophoenix. It's physical therapy for stroke patients. So people who are rehabilitating from a stroke and trying to recover motor movement. So that's really fulfilling. That taps to that initial intrinsic motivation of, if we nail fitness, we'll earn the right to have a crack at health, and we're doing that now.
So, what were some of the biggest technical or business hurdles you faced while developing such a cutting edge product?
This is a 2 hour podcast, right? That's the Um, I mean, the biggest technical challenge is it's never been done before. I mean, we weren't building an
Yeah.
app, in a world where VCs are like, well, there's an app for that. You can build an app over a weekend, show me some traction. We spent years just figuring out, is this even, we were very fortunate. Two of the founders had had exits before. We were in a position of like, we're going to spend some time because this is huge if true, but we don't know the
Mm.
if true part. So just figuring out the motion capture, figuring out, could we build sensors in clothing? I'm sure you'll want to talk about pivots, but we pivoted from sensors towards computer vision during the lifetime of the company. But even once we had a skeleton, can we teach a machine to understand it? My co-founder, my CTO, Bill, one of my two co-founders, Bill's previous company that he took public was a speech recognition company. So he knew the
Oh.
challenges of, no product survives first contact with a real human being. And, uh, and so, we might be able to get the machine to recognize us doing a squat, but will it recognize the entire population with all their,
Mm.
idiosyncrasies? So there were just like really core technical challenges of, we're doing something hard, and investors don't want to pay for that. Like, investors want to
No.
remove risk. And so the first 4 years of the company, which would have been 2 with investment, but were 4 because we were having to go at the pace of, we don't have any funding to hire many people. We're just really resolving that question of, is this even technically possible? Uh,
Hmm.
I think the second thing I would share is just, we're 10 years in, and it's only been really the last 18 months to 2 years that we're not being challenged on why people want this, or is this a thing? For the first 7 or 8 years, you hold a provocative point of view about the future that not many share yet. And
Yeah.
and so you have to be very open to the idea that you're wrong, but you have to be very open to the idea that you're right as well. And that's
Yeah.
often a fine balance.
So You've worked with giants like Adobe, Microsoft, leading innovative projects, obviously. What lessons from your corporate experience helped shape your entrepreneurial approach?
I love that question because talking of provocative points of view, like I'm not, I wouldn't strongly advocate for someone to be an entrepreneur upon graduation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's a very, being an entrepreneur is not a career path for me. Being an entrepreneur is you have found some burning itch that you believe with urgency that only you can scratch, and if you don't, someone else will do it first, and
Mm,
you're the one that should be solving the problem, not someone else, because you want the problem solved. Um, and so when I think back to Adobe, and I entered Adobe through an acquisition, I had a relatively small software design consultancy building enterprise software. Controversial at the time was that designers should be anywhere near enterprise software. That the
mm,
software we used at work could just look bad and not work very well. um, and when I joined Adobe, suddenly I became a member of the leadership team of Adobe Consulting, and I was surrounded by career consultants, IBM, Lotus kind of consultants.
mm-hmm.
Um, and they took me under their wing. Some of the dearest people that are still dear to me took me under their wing and were like, we're going to pass it on. And consulting is, it's solution selling, it's sales, it's curiosity of your customer, knowing how to make technology in service of a business problem, not in service of a technology problem. And then it's hiring, and it's unfortunately firing and laying people off, and running a QBR and having a sales target and reporting it and missing it and figuring out how you're going
Yeah.
to make it when it's a month from this. Those like lessons that you don't want to be learning yourself on your own money or on the 12 months of runway that you have. You want to have learned that stuff under the tutelage of experts in a kind of slightly more psychologically safe environment. And so I learned so much at Adobe. And I was also introduced to design thinking. Adobe is one of the most phenomenal design-led companies in the world. And we made that a central thesis of Adobe Consulting is like,
Mm,
let's lead with design and curiosity about our customer's customer, like who's the user and what are their needs and what are their unmet goals. Um, and I carry that through with me to this day to ASENSEI. When I'm sitting down with one of my customers, I'm curious about their customer. So it's not like, what can I sell to you? It's how can I help you sell to your customer? And so that was the biggest gift that Adobe gave me was I just really helped me um, amass the tools that you need to be able to sit in a
mm-hmm.
CEO seat and not be doing everything for the first time.
Yeah. I absolutely love your answer because I work with founders all the time, and I think that's one of the things they don't think about it because they're so passionate about the product, their idea, what they're going to build. But there's this whole other side of the business that you have to run. And in a lot of cases when VCs come in, they'll say you need to hire a CEO, someone who can actually run the
Right,
business, right? And I love your answer
right.
because you took the time to learn ahead of time and really identify all those different areas that now as you run your own business you're like, I know this stuff because you took the time to learn it ahead of time, and not just because you anticipated that you were going to become an entrepreneur, but you were just curious and you just learned it, right?
Yeah, one of the sales leaders I worked with at Adobe, Ken Smith, yeah, I remember he invited me to his new hire sales training. It was or getting his team together. It wasn't new hire sales training, but he was putting his team together. And I remember that being the lesson he gave every year is how important. And I sold with Nike and I sold with Ken in accounts like Nike, but at Adobe. And he always taught his sales team that that was the most important skill, curiosity. That,
Yeah.
if you, it's cliched, you've got two ears and one mouth, but it's true. If you listen to your customer, they'll tell you what they want to buy from you. And so just going in with your sales pitch, and are you
Yeah.
buying a lot? Is nowhere near as insightful as that curiosity of like, why did you want this meeting with me? So,
Yeah. I want to add to that because I think you brought a good point, but you didn't go deeper into it. But I think like
Fun.
listening is a skill. And I go into meetings all the time and people that are trying to sell me things, but they're just talking, and they're not asking me, "Hey, what do you need?" and then letting me explain it. So then sometimes I come out of those meetings and I'm like, "Wait, why did I even set up the meeting? They weren't even interested in listening to anything that I had to say. Like, how are they trying to sell me something?" And I do think that
Right.
having the ability to like just sit there for an hour and listen, I think that's a skill. And I don't think everybody has that.
I'll take it one step further as
Take
well. Like
it.
I'm glad you
Yes.
did. But, is one of the lessons I learned for the first time, the design team at Adobe, the UX team, which I was privileged to end up leading, before I left the company, is the importance of like ethnography and anthropology. We would literally, the first thing, I'll give you a really concrete example. When I moved to California, my boss at the time said, I need you to do your design thing inside Adobe, not for other customers, inside Adobe. We're about to launch Creative Cloud. Um, you know, we want to make sure that our customer support experience is top notch, and it's not. So do your design thing. And the first thing we did is we put some of our designers in the Adobe call centers. They went through the call center training. They sat with other members of call center staff. And the things you learn end of the pain are very different to the business telling you, right? It was like, oh, it was so stressful. The whole time I was trying to take this call, there was a board telling me I had three other calls and my machine crashed because I had two SAP running, one to see the customer's last
Mm.
call and one to see this call. And you learn all of these things that are like, we understand the consequence of the problem, poor customer satisfaction, or long call handle times, or calling in multiple times, but we didn't really understand the source of the problem is different to what we thought. And so even to this day with ASENSEI, we spend a lot of time with our customer's customer. If you're one of my sales prospects, I've probably snuck my way into your Facebook members group to see what your customers are saying about your product. And I know that before I
Mm.
go into a sales meeting with you. I probably know the top three things in your Facebook group that they possibly don't know because they don't have that same kind of voice of the customer program in place. And so giving away a big trick here. Um,
Love it.
but the voice of your customer's customer is more important than the voice of your customer.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with that. So you mentioned this earlier, and let's talk about pivots.
Yes.
Because every company at some point goes through one or a couple. Can you share a time when you realized you required a significant change or pivot, and how did you navigate it through? And the reason why I want to ask this question is because I find that sometimes, not everyone, but some people have a hard time identifying when a pivot is necessary, and they're just kind of like beating a dead horse when really they should be, oh, like this isn't working, or here's an opportunity to pivot. How did you go through a pivot, but how did you realize you needed to pivot?
I was on a call just 2 days ago with one of my customers, or
Okay.
customer target customers, someone incredibly senior in the Navy. And he used the phrase, which is very military, but I love it. And it was kill metrics. He was like, and he was part of the Office of Innovation inside of the Navy. And he talked about kill metrics being knowing ahead of time when you were going to kill a project or kill an idea. And what I love about that is it removes um, it's dispassionate. It removes the emotion from, well, maybe we should just try a little bit. And it's like, no, we said that if after 6 months we didn't see X
Mm,
percent or Y percent of this, then it was time to kill this project. And it was, what did we learn and what's our next hypothesis and how are we going to do differently? So I think, I'm sharing that as a lesson I just learned, in
mm,
the last few days. But I really liked that. I'm a big believer in financial planning and forecast models of trigger metrics. It's like not we'll hire four new salespeople in December. There's a metric. It's for every X new accounts, we'll hire one new salesperson 3 months later. So it's very like we know
mm,
what the plan is. To come back to your question. I think an important thing with pivots is you need to they shouldn't be reactive. It should be something you've thought about, if this, then that.
Mm,
And I'll give you a very concrete example. I had a strong point of view starting a sensei, strong point of view loosely held, starting a sensei. The way we were going to motion capture people was with smart clothing, as we mentioned earlier, with sensors and clothing.
yeah.
Uh, um, we would be able to license this sensor technology to Nike and Under Armour and Lululemon, and that would be motion capture. And then we'd put the voice of Tiger Woods in your ear paired with your Nike golf shirt, or Steph Curry in your Under Armour basketball shirt. And that was the original like go to market. Um, Lots of investors would be like, well, why aren't you doing computer vision? And why not cameras? And I'd just been at Microsoft, where we had Microsoft Connect, this like very expensive piece of hardware, big camera, and I just couldn't imagine a world in which that was going to go down to this on a phone,
Mm,
or was going to end up in a laptop. So again, I had a very strong point of view, loosely held, that computer vision wasn't going to be getting there anytime soon. And I was right,
mm,
it wasn't anytime soon. However, 5 or 6 years in, we had a moment of like, computer vision's not there yet, but we think it's going to be. Like
mm,
the sheer compute power on our phones, the advances in AI, it's not good enough yet, but it's going to be good enough, and good enough that it'll be much less friction than for people to buy connected apparel where there's a behavior change there. I've never charged my shirt before. I've never blued my pants before. Um, so we were prepared for that pivot, and we were just constantly looking for the moment of, is it now, or do we put off that decision? And there just came a point where we were having the conversation far too often that we thought it was necessary, that we started to move towards and kind of test that direction. So I think pivots are often, these like acts of desperation. They're framed as this act of desperation, and I don't think they need to be like that. The more
yeah.
you're in love with the problem than the solution, the more open to possibility that you are, that the solution you're on right now is maybe not the best solution given what you've learned up to this point.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I also think it has to do a lot with, just being realistic to yourself. Like, I've been doing this for 6 years and it's not going anywhere, right? Like, am I
Yeah.
just going to keep doing it, or is this an opportunity to either stop or pivot? But if I'm going to pivot, how am I going to pivot? Have I collected enough data or information to help me make an educated pivot, right? At the same time.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that, if you go back to the original, the lean startup was when we first kind of really started talking about
Ah,
pivot. I don't think enough people have read that book to really know what we mean when we talk about pivot. Was like there
yeah.
are 5 or 6 different ways of pivoting. It wasn't like, hard turn left. And I think the most underrated pivot, which comes back to our conversation on curiosity, is the zoom in pivot. It's in the book as the zoom in pivot. And the zoom in pivot is, you thought the problem you were solving was this size,
Yeah.
but when it comes down to it, this thing here appears to be the most acute pain where you're drawing people in, and maybe this other stuff becomes a little more superfluous and you zoom in on
Mm-hmm.
that. I think Slack is the example that's often used of that. Is, Slack was a games company, and then eventually they realized that the most valuable thing they had was their internal collaboration tool. And maybe
Yeah.
that should be the focus. A pretty extreme example. But I think as founders, the more you're speaking to customers, the more you're being curious, the more you might start to see the overlap of like that one thing there is our entry point. And it doesn't mean that in the future the grand plan doesn't emerge again, but you've
Mm-hmm.
found that kind of strong pull that's going to pull you into the market to solve a problem that the market wants to be solved.
In the beginning, before we started recording the episode, you said something to me where you were like, I no longer work weekends, and I learned that from previous. So was that something that could have been something that was a fail in the past that you didn't do and you learned from it? And that could be a
I mean,
lesson learned.
it's a good point, but there you go. It's a lesson learned. I don't
Yeah.
frame it as a failure. And
Yeah.
listen, at that time, my first company, and even like Adobe, I mean, I had way more energy when I joined Adobe in like 2009 than I do now. And like
Yeah.
I worked relentless amount of hours. And I remember one of my dear friends who was, the age I am now. he's like, I just can't keep up with you. And I just had that energy of like, early in my career, hungry to climb. Um, and so I don't see that as a failure. It's not sustainable. And I'm quite
Mm-hmm.
happy to sit down with people now and say, you know, a startup is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you think, working weekends and working 60-hour days is a sustainable pace, it's not. And who am I to tell people they shouldn't work weekends? But if you're going to be running that hard, you probably want to have more breaks in your working day as well. You want to have big
Yeah.
chunks of, I mean, as an athlete and coach, it's rest and recovery. And I think that's the lesson for me is like, yeah, high performance demands that right equilibrium of rest and recovery, and you just can't run hard all the time.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you're also an athlete, and I just find that athletes just have a different mindset when it comes to things like that. Like failure is almost not an option for athletes because they're just like, I'm going to find a way to make it happen.
And I'm going to learn from that performance. As a coach, I probably learn more. It's easier as a coach than it is as an athlete because as a
Mm,
coach, you're a lot less attached to the failure. It's like, if I lost the final, right? I
yeah.
made it to the final and I lost. It's like, oh, why did I try and throw that, technique or, why did I not just? Whereas a coach, you can a little bit more dispassionately see what happened and what you can do better. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, I think you're right. I think that is definitely a kind of a coach athlete mindset of like we didn't get the result we were looking for, but we got closer to the result than we'd been before. So how do we get further the next time? And again,
yeah.
martial arts, it's Kaizen, it's continuous improvement. So,
Yeah. No, for sure. So as someone who has built businesses across industries, what advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur about resilience and navigating the ups and downs of the startup journey?
I mean, from a resilience perspective, we live in such a hustle culture and we celebrate the people for whom it seems easy.
Yeah.
They just raised $10 million and, they're on this podcast or they're getting interviewed on Bloomberg and we kind of idolize the outliers and we
Mm,
don't spend enough time um, spending time with the people who, we say this a lot, founder to founder, like misery loves company, right? And, I
yeah.
think for a lot of founders, it's important to surround yourself with other people for whom it's as hard as you, not for whom, you know, they worked at Google and they were on the side of another exit. They just, right place, right time, made some money, VCs threw
Mm,
money at them. That's you're not going to learn anything from that other than like if you're lucky, you should use that luck in the future. So, I think just like it's hard.
yeah.
Building a company is hard. Convincing people to join the company is finding good people who are willing to go the distance with you is hard. Finding investment is hard. Um, winning your first customer is hard. Getting that first customer to be a successful reference it's all hard.
Yeah.
And the overnight successes take 7 to 10 years. And I think that's my whenever I've had a sort of, especially a younger entrepreneur, sit down with me and ask for advice, that's my question. It's like, how old will you be in 10 years' time? Because that's how long you should be. If you're going to be successful, you should probably bet on the salary that you're earning, the 401k that you're not paying into,
Mm,
those are all for the next 10 years. And so how do you feel about your idea now? That's a really good kind of filter. And listen, I want to encourage entrepreneurialism and I want to encourage people to believe that they can do what they want to do. But the most important thing is that like it's got to be burning inside of you. Like I am still as passionate about solving this problem now, if not way more so, than I was 10 years ago. And that's the fuel. That's the fuel. If
yeah.
it's not an intrinsic motivation, and if it's an extrinsic motivation of fame and fortune, that's going to get old along the 10-year journey, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I agree with you 100%. So we're coming up on time, but before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, looking to forward, where do you see a sensei and the connected health and fitness industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years? How do you plan to stay at the forefront of this space?
It's not even the next 5 to 10 years for us. I mean, I think so much gets defined in the next two or three.
Mm,
I'm kind of from the school of category design. I'm a big believer in you create categories, you don't create companies. Now, not every company agree. but I'm more interested in creating a category and creating the company that leads it. And so I think over the next 2 or 3 years, the opportunity we have is you have a category when there's a line item on every company's P&L to invest in that, like
Mm,
CRM or
right.
ERP, or and so I think for ASENSEI, we are an ingredient technology for any digital health or fitness product. And the problem we're really solving is personalization. Movement recognition is the enabling technology for personalization. And so, where do I see the category emerging is, we'll keep up with the trends. And so today I've talked to you about how do you have the voice of a coach in your ear. In the next 12 months, we'll be cloning the voices of real humans, that's voices you recognize, but they'll be in your ear. Sonia, step your left leg back a little and turn your feet to the good.
Oh, wow.
Just there, right? So that'll be the voice of a celebrity trainer or celebrity athlete or non-athlete or coach.
Mm-hmm.
We've already done experiments for how do we put the video of that athlete in front of you, but speaking to you, using your name, talking about what you did last Tuesday, talking about the lesson we just learned. So generative video. So we're creating video clones of coaches. We're in the world of like 5 to 10 years. Like we can't imagine what we're going to have in 12 to 18 in this, AI
Wow.
age. And then also we did some work over a year ago with Qualcomm, where we put a Sensei with one of our partners, Lightsport, in a mixed reality headset. So the coach is literally standing in your living room,
Wow.
looking at you, telling you what you did wrong. I'll send you a video afterwards, and you can take a look at that.
That's
Um,
crazy.
it's so cool. And so now, you have this apparition of your coach. Now it's pre-recorded green screen video today, right? We've got green screen recordings of you're not
Mm,
squatting deeply enough. I want you to do this. But now bring together the generative video and the video cloning of a real coach. Now I can have that coach standing in front of you almost on the fly, reacting to what. So imagine in the rest, you're in a workout, and then 5 minutes later you're getting a 30-second rest, and now that coach is literally standing, commenting on your last 5 minutes and what you did well and what you're going to do next and what they want you to see. That video will be generated on the fly, not recorded from a clone of a coach. So we're in such an exciting time right now that these confluence of technologies are allowing me to deliver on this vision of like, how can I digitally put a coach in the room with you, watching you, understanding you, and coaching you. And we feel very excited. We're out in front of the category, and it's a category that's pulling us into healthcare. It's pulling us into industrial healthcare, factory floor workers,
mm.
and making sure they're physically fit and safe. And so I'm just blown away by the next 2 years. I don't need to worry about the next 5 or 10 years. The
I'm
next 2 years, all else follows that.
I'm
Yeah,
like, I'm listening to you and I'm like, wow, I wasn't even
yeah.
expecting for you to say half the stuff you just said. That's incredible.
I mean,
That's
since you're in
crazy.
Toronto, I grew up in a hockey family, and the people claim that both my uncles played for Team Great Britain. That's how they have a friend with a jersey in the Hall of Fame. And like I would stand in my backyard with a piece of plywood on the ground because no snow and no ice, slapping pucks into a net. And I'm imagining Wayne Gretzky's there, correcting my slap shot. I would be in my garage hitting my punch bag, imagining that Bruce Lee was standing in the corner giving me coaching. Like that's how I played sport as a kid. I'd been playing soccer. I was
Wow.
Pele or Maradona. Um, and that was kind of the vision for ASENSEI is like, how can we do that? How can we learn sport inspired by our idols as if they're there? And the as if they're there is a whole level of HD 4K fidelity that didn't exist when I was an 8-year-old. And I'm just delighted that I get to bring it to market.
It's insane. I absolutely love what you're doing. It's amazing. I'm a little blown
Oh,
away by all of it, and I'm excited to see where you guys go with it.
yeah, us too.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's
Yeah.
a few pivots along the way in the right direction.
For sure. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I just really enjoyed this conversation. I mean, I'm in tech, so whenever I get to talk to another tech founder, I absolutely love it. I these are my favorite episodes. So,
Awesome.
thank you again for joining me. And just before we leave, can you just tell our audience where to find you if anyone has any questions, want to reach out to you, and all of that information?
Best place to find us is LinkedIn. We're pretty prolific on LinkedIn. We like to share what we're doing. We like to share what we're thinking. So find ASENSEI, and the spelling will be in your plug, but find ASENSEI on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. And several of my team are quite prolific sharing as well. Don't go to our website. We need to fix that.
Okay. Well, Steven, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
I want to thank Steven for joining me today and sharing his journey as a martial artist and championship winning coach to leading innovations in the tech and fitness worlds. Steven's story reminds us that resilience, adaptability, and passion are the cornerstone of success. Whether it's building a groundbreaking company like ASENSEI, navigating pivots, or learning from failures, Steven's insights are a masterclass in entrepreneurship and innovation. And that's a wrap. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of learning, growth, and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and connect with our community on social media. I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave a review and let me know what topics you'd want to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace challenges, adapt with tenacity, and keep pushing forward. Keep growing, keep pivoting, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more insightful conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.